My husband was sleeping with our daughter's godmother. So I took my little girl and left Ohio in the middle of the night. Less than 24 hours later, a stranger looked at my daughter inside a diner in North Carolina and nearly dropped his coffee. Then he asked one question that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. How old is she? When I looked up at him, I was staring at the face of the man I buried 8 years ago. Sometimes betrayal does not arrive like a storm. Sometimes it pours wine at your charity fundraiser, kisses your daughter on the forehead, and calls itself family. The night I caught my husband sleeping with my daughter's godmother, I thought my marriage was ending. I had no idea my entire life was. The strange part is, looking back now, the signs had been there for months, maybe years, floating quietly beneath the surface, like cracks under lake ice, visible only when the light hit at the right angle. Ryan had become softer with me in public and colder in private. He complimented me in front of neighbors, then ignored me across our own kitchen table. Savannah started coming over more often, always with expensive pastries from that bakery downtown. Always carrying herself like a woman auditioning for a life she secretly wanted to steal. But people like me, loyal people, exhausted people, become experts at explaining away discomfort. That Friday evening in late October, our neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, hosted its annual fall fundraiser for the elementary school arts program. Families crowded into the rented country club ballroom wearing sweaters and boots. Waiters carried trays of mini crab cakes and cheap champagne, while local real estate agents competed to look generous in front of people they secretly judged. Ryan loved those events. He knew exactly how to move through a room, how to laugh with one hand in his pocket, how to make older couples trust him within 30 seconds. I used to admire that about him. By 8:30, Lily had fallen asleep in a chair near the coat room, with her little cardigan bundled beneath her cheek. I bent down and brushed hair from her forehead, feeling that familiar ache mothers carry, the constant fear that life can change, while your child is still dreaming peacefully beside you. Claire. I looked up and saw Savannah smiling at me from across the hall. Her lipstick was perfect. Her blonde curls rested neatly against one shoulder, and her diamond bracelet sparkled every time she moved her hand. You okay? She asked. You look tired. I am tired, I admitted softly. Well, she laughed, welcome to motherhood. She walked away before I could answer, and for some reason the smell of her perfume lingered in my chest longer than it should have. About 20 minutes later, Ryan disappeared. At first, I barely noticed. He floated around constantly at these things, shaking hands, telling stories, refilling drinks. But then I realized Savannah had disappeared too. A cold feeling slid quietly into my stomach. I tried to ignore it, I really did. I stood near the silent auction tables, pretending to study handcrafted pottery, while my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway near the private banquet rooms. I remember hearing laughter somewhere behind me. I remember someone talking about mortgage rates, ordinary suburban conversations, ordinary American lives. And then I saw Ryan's jacket hanging over a chair near the corridor. Something inside me simply knew. Not suspicion. Not insecurity. Recognition. The kind that arrives before truth does. I walked down the hallway, slowly hearing muffled voices behind one of the closed doors. At first I could not make out the words. Then Savannah laughed low, intimate, comfortable. I stopped breathing. Ryan said something I couldn't hear clearly, followed by the sound of kissing. My hand trembled against the brass doorknob. When I pushed the door open, neither of them noticed me immediately. Savannah sat on the edge of a long banquet table, her dress pulled halfway up her thigh. Ryan stood between her knees, kissing her neck, while his wedding ring flashed beneath the dim light. The room tilted. I did not scream. People always imagine women scream during moments like that, but shock is quieter than rage. Shock sounds like blood draining from your face while your entire nervous system tries to deny what your eyes already understand. Savannah looked up first. And God, I will never forget her expression. Not guilt. Annoyance. Like I had interrupted something inconvenient. Ryan stepped back, immediately running a hand through his hair. Claire. I turned around before he could finish. I heard footsteps behind me in the hallway. Claire, wait. I kept walking. Claire. I stopped near the emergency exit doors because my knees suddenly felt weak enough to collapse beneath me. Ryan lowered his voice. It's not what you think. I laughed once, a hollow sound that didn't even feel human. You're sleeping with Lily's godmother. Claire. No, I whispered. No. Don't say my name like I'm the one embarrassing you right now. His face hardened then almost instantly, and that frightened me more than the affair itself. The mask slipped too fast, revealing something cold beneath it. We weren't trying to hurt you. I stared at him in disbelief. He exhaled sharply. You've been checked out for years. Ever since Ethan died, you've never really been fully here. There it was. Ethan. Even after 8 years, hearing my first husband's name still struck somewhere deep inside my ribs. Ryan continued, quieter now. I spent years trying to build a life with you while you mourned another man. I felt sick. Savannah appeared at the end of the hallway, arms folded across her chest. Maybe this was inevitable, Claire. I looked at her slowly. My best friend. The woman who held my hand during labor. The woman who helped decorate Lily's nursery. The woman sitting beside me at church every Christmas Eve. You knew everything about me, I said. Savannah sighed impatiently. You were lonely when Ryan met you. Honestly, you were basically a widow looking for someone to save you. That sentence entered my body like a knife, because somewhere deep down part of me feared it was true. Ryan rubbed his forehead. Can we please not do this here? Not do this here. As if I were creating a scene. As if betrayal only became ugly once the victim reacted to it. I looked at both of them standing there together beneath the warm hallway lights, and suddenly I saw my entire marriage differently. Every late office meeting, every canceled dinner, every moment Savannah volunteered to babysit Lily. A terrible clarity settled over me. I walked back into the ballroom, picked up my sleeping daughter, grabbed my purse, and left without another word. Outside, cold rain had started falling across the parking lot. Lily stirred against my shoulder. Mommy. It's okay, baby, I whispered. Go back to sleep. By midnight, I had packed 2 suitcases, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, important documents, and half the cash from our joint emergency account. The half my lawyer would later confirm legally belonged to me. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside Ryan's expensive coffee machine. Then I drove. Out of Columbus, out of Ohio, out of the life I thought I had rebuilt after grief nearly destroyed me the first time. The interstate stretched endlessly through darkness, while Lily slept in the back seat beneath a blanket. Around 4 a.m, I pulled into a gas station somewhere in West Virginia, bought terrible coffee, and cried alone beside the pump, while country music played faintly through outdoor speakers. I remember thinking, at least the worst thing has already happened. I was wrong. By late afternoon the next day, we reached Asheville, North Carolina. The mountains glowed bronze beneath the autumn light, and for the first time in hours, Lily smiled when she saw street musicians downtown. Can we stay here a while, she asked. Yeah, I said softly. I think we can. We checked into a small extended stay hotel near Tunnel Road, and after Lily napped for an hour, I took her to a nearby diner because neither of us had eaten properly since Ohio. The place smelled like coffee and fried onions. An older waitress called everyone honey, and football played silently above the counter television. For 10 whole minutes, life almost felt normal. Then the front door opened. A man walked inside carrying a takeout coffee tray, wearing a dark green jacket and jeans faded from age. He looked tired in the way certain men do, not physically tired, but emotionally weathered, like life had sanded pieces off him over time. He glanced toward our booth. Then he froze. The coffee tray tilted dangerously in his hands. His eyes locked onto Lily. Not casually, not politely. Like he had seen a ghost. Slowly he walked closer. Excuse me, he said quietly, his voice rough with disbelief. How old is she? Something inside me tightened. I looked up at him fully for the first time, and my entire body went numb. Because the man standing in front of me had Ethan's eyes, Ethan's face, Ethan's voice, the face of the man I buried 8 years ago. For a few seconds the entire diner disappeared around me. The clinking dishes, the low hum of conversation, the old Lynyrd Skynyrd song drifting through hidden speakers, all of it faded beneath the violent pounding of my heartbeat. I stared at the man standing beside our booth, while my brain tried desperately to force logic into something impossible. Because Ethan Cole was dead. I had identified his wedding ring myself. I had stood beside a closed casket while military officers handed me a folded American flag. I had signed papers, cried through condolences, learned how to survive the unbearable silence grief leaves behind. Dead men did not walk into diners in North Carolina asking about little girls. Lily looked up at him curiously, still holding a French fry between her fingers. "I'm 7, she said innocently. The man swallowed hard. 7. He repeated the number in his head the way people do when they are calculating something painful. Then his eyes slowly lifted toward me again. And I saw it. Not resemblance. Recognition. His face had changed with age. There was more weight around his jaw, now faint scars near his temple, deeper lines around his eyes. But no amount of time could erase the expression I had once loved more than my own reflection. "Claire," he whispered. My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered across the floor. The waitress gasped somewhere behind us, but I barely heard her. Blood rushed loudly through my ears while every muscle in my body turned cold. "No," I said, immediately shaking my head, "no." The man looked devastated just hearing that word. "I know how this looks." "How this looks?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "You're dead." A few customers had started glancing toward us now. Ethan noticed and lowered his voice instantly, the same way he always used to whenever I felt overwhelmed in public. "Please," he said carefully, "I'm not trying to scare you." "Too late." Lily looked between us with wide, confused eyes. "Mommy." I stood up so quickly the booth rattled against the floor. "Come on, baby." "Claire, don't run." The sentence almost stopped me because of how familiar it sounded in his voice. For years after Ethan died, I had forgotten certain details first. The exact sound of his laugh, the rhythm of his footsteps, the way he said my name when he was worried about me. But suddenly all of it came flooding back so hard it hurt. I grabbed Lily's hand and hurried toward the exit. "Claire," he called again, following carefully but not aggressively. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Outside, the October air hit my face like ice water. I reached the parking lot before stopping beside my car because my hands had started shaking too badly to unlock the door. Lily tugged softly at my sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" I crouched down immediately, forcing myself to breathe despite the panic clawing through my chest. "Yes, sweetheart," I lied gently. "I just need a minute." Behind us, the diner door opened. Ethan stepped outside, slowly keeping distance between us. Up close, he looked thinner than he once had. His shoulders still carried that quiet military posture, but exhaustion lived inside him now. Deep, permanent exhaustion, the kind trauma leaves behind after years of surviving things nobody else can see. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. I stared at him like looking too long might break reality completely. "How are you alive?" The question came out almost angry. Because grief changes shape when the dead return, relief is not the first emotion. Rage is. Ethan looked down briefly before answering. The flood didn't kill me. 8 years earlier, Ethan had been deployed with an Army National Guard rescue unit during catastrophic flooding in Louisiana. His team had been evacuating civilians when their rescue vehicle overturned in violent water conditions during the storm. 2 men died immediately. Ethan disappeared downstream. After 3 weeks, the military declared him presumed dead. At least that was the story I had been given. Ethan rubbed a hand across the scar near his temple. I hit my head when the vehicle flipped. They found me almost 40 miles away near Baton Rouge. I felt dizzy. "They found you." I didn't remember my name. His voice remained calm, but I could hear shame underneath it. Didn't remember anything for a long time. My throat tightened painfully. Traumatic brain injury, memory loss, VA rehabilitation. The pieces began fitting together with terrifying logic. "They moved me through different treatment centers," he continued quietly. Texas first, then Georgia, later North Carolina. Most days I barely knew who I was. Lily stood close against my side, listening silently now. Ethan glanced at her again, and something vulnerable passed across his face so quickly it nearly broke me. "She looks exactly like your mother around the eyes," he murmured. I stopped breathing. My mother had died when I was 23. Only Ethan knew how often people used to say we shared the same eyes. "You remember my mother," I whispered. "I remember everything now." The parking lot suddenly felt too small. Too real. Too impossible. I leaned against the car for support while pieces of the past crashed violently into one another inside my head. The last 8 years replayed differently now, my loneliness after Ethan's death, Ryan slowly entering my life, the careful patience he showed while helping me through grief. Had all of it been built on a lie? No, that was impossible. Wasn't it? Ethan looked hesitant for the first time. "I tried contacting you." The sentence sliced through me instantly. "What?" "A few years ago," he said, "after I started getting memories back." I shook my head immediately. No, I would have known. "I called your old number." My stomach dropped. A strange expression crossed Ethan's face, then confusion mixed with discomfort. A man answered. Every nerve in my body went still. "Ryan." "He said you had moved on," Ethan continued slowly. "Said reconnecting would destroy your life, and honestly..." He swallowed once. "At the time I still wasn't stable. I believed him." Cold spread through my chest. "When was this?" "About 4 years ago." 4 years. Ryan and I had already been married by then. I stared at Ethan in horror. "You talked to my husband." "I didn't know he was your husband." The world tilted sideways. Memories I had ignored for years suddenly returned with brutal clarity. Ryan discouraging me from revisiting old military records. Ryan insisting grief counseling mattered more than digging up ghosts. Ryan becoming strangely tense anytime Ethan's name appeared unexpectedly in conversation. Dear God. Ethan watched my face carefully. "Claire, what's wrong?" I could barely answer. Because a terrible possibility had begun forming inside my mind, and once certain truths enter your body, you cannot force them back out. "What exactly did Ryan tell you?" Ethan hesitated. "That you finally found peace," he said quietly. "That you had a daughter and a new life, and hearing from me would only reopen old wounds." Lily tugged my sleeve gently. "Mommy." I looked down at her sweet face, then back at Ethan standing beneath the fading mountain sunlight. Ryan knew. Maybe not from the beginning, maybe not right away. But somehow, somewhere along the line, my husband learned Ethan was alive. And he said nothing. The realization hollowed me out so completely I nearly lost my balance. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, then stopped himself. That tiny hesitation hurt more than if he had touched me. Because once upon a time this man had every right to hold me together when I fell apart. Now we were strangers standing in a parking lot with 8 years of stolen life buried between us. A cold wind moved through the mountains. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "There's more you don't know." I looked up slowly. And for the first time since seeing him again, fear overtook shock. Because something in his voice told me my marriage was not simply broken. It was built on something rotten from the start. That night, after I finally got Lily asleep in the small hotel room, I sat alone in the bathroom with the shower running just to cover the sound of my crying. Not loud crying. The dangerous kind. Silent, shaking grief that feels less like emotion and more like your body physically rejecting reality. I sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at my wedding ring for almost 20 minutes before finally pulling it off my finger. The pale indentation it left behind looked strangely permanent, like proof of how long I had worn a lie without realizing it. Outside the bathroom door, I could hear Lily breathing softly in bed. 7 years old. 7 years of bedtime stories, birthday parties, school pickups, scraped knees, Christmas mornings, all connected to a man who may have built our entire life on deception. I pressed both hands over my face. Then I did something I had not done in years. I opened the old military archive folder on my laptop. For a long time after Ethan's presumed death, I had obsessed over every report connected to the Louisiana flood rescue operation. Then eventually survival forced me to stop. Grief counselors call it functional detachment, the point where mourning becomes too exhausting to continue daily. Ryan had encouraged that process. Now the memory of his encouragement made me sick. You can't stay trapped in the past forever, Claire. Looking at those files is hurting you. Ethan wouldn't want you destroying yourself. At the time, his words sounded compassionate. Now they sounded strategic. I spent hours digging through old emails, archived correspondence insurance documents, military notices, and forgotten digital folders I had not opened since Lily was a baby. Around 2:30 in the morning, exhaustion blurred my vision. But I kept going because instinct had fully taken control by then. Somewhere deep inside me, I already knew what I was going to find. I just needed proof strong enough to survive it. At 3:11 a.m. I found the first crack. An email from 4 years earlier. Sender Ethan Cole. Subject line: Claire, if this reaches you. My pulse stopped. The message had never appeared in my inbox because Ryan had redirected certain archived accounts after we married. The email had automatically forwarded into an old folder connected to shared household settings I barely understood at the time. My hands shook violently as I opened it. Claire, I don't know if hearing from me will hurt you or help you. Honestly, I still don't fully understand what happened to me. Some days my memories come back clearly, other days it feels like I'm reading someone else's life from far away. But I remember you. I remember your laugh, I remember Ohio in winter, I remember promising I'd come home. A man answered your number. He said you rebuilt your life and asked me not to contact you again. I'm trying to respect that. I just needed to know you were okay. I'm sorry for everything. Ethan. The timestamp showed Ryan had opened the message 27 minutes after it arrived. I felt physically ill. Not because Ethan wrote it. Because Ryan never told me. He read those words. He knew my husband was alive. Then he buried the truth and climbed into Ethan's place beside me. A sound escaped my throat, small, broken, humiliated. I remembered Ryan holding me after nightmares, Ryan helping Lily learn to walk, Ryan kissing my forehead at church while people admired what a devoted husband he was. All while knowing. I kept digging. By sunrise, the full shape of the betrayal had begun emerging piece by piece, uglier than anything I could have imagined. Ryan had contacted VA administrators directly after Ethan resurfaced in the system. He positioned himself as a protective spouse concerned about my emotional stability, insisting reconnecting with Ethan could trigger severe psychological regression after years of grief recovery. He used therapy language. Clinical language. Manipulative people always learn whatever vocabulary gives them power. There were emails. Phone records. Even one message where Ryan described Ethan as confused and potentially delusional. I stared at that sentence for a long time. The cruelty of it settled slowly inside me. Ethan had spent years fighting his way back from trauma and memory loss, only to have another man quietly erase him all over again. And the worst part, Ryan did not do it because he loved me too much to lose me. He did it because he wanted Ethan's life. Around 7:30 that morning, there was a soft knock at my hotel room door. I almost ignored it. Then I looked through the peephole and saw Ethan standing there holding a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches and coffee. For one irrational second, I nearly burst into tears from the sheer familiarity of it. Ethan always brought breakfast after hard nights. Always. I opened the door slowly. "You don't have to let me in," he said carefully. "I just thought Lily might be hungry." His caution around me hurt in ways I couldn't explain. "Come in," I whispered. He stepped inside quietly while Lily remained asleep beneath tangled blankets. Morning sunlight spilled through the thin hotel curtains, painting pale gold across Ethan's face. Up close, the changes in him became even clearer. Old scars, exhaustion beneath his eyes, the posture of someone who had spent years learning how to exist again. But he still moved like Ethan. Still folded napkins neatly, still glanced instinctively toward Lily before sitting down, still carried gentleness like second nature. That realization almost destroyed me more than the betrayal itself. Because Ryan spent years pretending to be a good man. Ethan simply was one. I found the emails, I said finally. Ethan lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. No, I whispered immediately. Don't apologize for surviving. Silence settled between us. Heavy, complicated, overflowing with years neither of us could recover. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me since the diner. Why didn't you keep trying to contact me? Pain flickered across his face. At the time, I barely trusted my own mind, he admitted quietly. Your husband sounded convincing. He said you finally healed. Said hearing from me would destroy your marriage and confuse your daughter. My daughter. The phrase suddenly felt unstable. Not because Ryan had never loved Lily. I believe in some complicated way he probably did, but because the foundation beneath our family had cracked open completely. Ethan looked toward Lily sleeping softly across the room. How old were you when she was born? He asked gently. 3 months after Ryan and I married. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. She has your eyes, I whispered quickly before the silence could become dangerous. Ethan looked down at his hands. I knew the second I saw her. A strange ache moved through my chest then because despite everything, despite the impossible situation surrounding us, there was no greed in Ethan's reaction. No territorial anger, no demand. Just grief. The grief of a man realizing 7 years of fatherhood had been stolen from him before he even knew he had a child. My phone suddenly buzzed against the table. Ryan. Again. 23 missed calls, 14 text messages. Claire, please answer me. You're overreacting. You don't understand the full story. We need to talk before someone manipulates you. Manipulates me. I laughed bitterly under my breath. Then another message arrived. I know you found him. Ethan saw my face change immediately. What is it? I handed him the phone silently. He read the message once and went completely still. Not angry. Worse. Prepared. Like a man recognizing a danger he already expected. He's going to come here, Ethan said quietly. Fear crawled up my spine. Why? Ethan looked directly at me then. And in his eyes for the first time, I saw something darker than heartbreak. I saw certainty. Because men like Ryan don't just steal marriages, he said softly. They steal identities, and they never give them back willingly. At that exact moment, Lily stirred awake behind us. She rubbed her sleepy eyes, looked at Ethan sitting near the window, and smiled naturally, instinctively, as if some invisible part of her already recognized him. Then she asked the question that shattered whatever strength I still had left. Mommy, why does he feel familiar? For the next 3 days, I lived with the strange sensation of existing between two lives. One was the life I had known, suburban routines, PTA meetings, mortgage payments, polite conversations over backyard fences, and a husband whose hand rested possessively against the small of my back whenever other men entered the room. The other was the truth. And truth, I was beginning to understand, changes the temperature of everything around it. I noticed it in small ways first. How often Ryan used guilt instead of honesty. How carefully he controlled information. How naturally he shifted blame onto other people whenever consequences approached him. Once you see manipulation clearly, you cannot unsee it again. By Monday morning, Ryan had tracked us to Asheville. I knew before he even knocked. There are certain footsteps your nervous system memorizes after years of marriage, and when I heard his shoes outside the hotel door, every muscle in my body tightened automatically. Lily looked up from her coloring book. Daddy! I forced myself to stay calm. Stay inside the bedroom for me, okay, sweetheart? Her small face fell slightly, but she nodded. Then I opened the door. Ryan stood there wearing dark jeans and the navy wool coat I bought him 2 Christmases ago. He looked exhausted, stubble along his jaw, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. But even then, even standing outside my hotel room after destroying our marriage, he still looked composed enough to sell trust for a living. That was Ryan's gift. He knew how to appear reasonable. Claire, he breathed. I folded my arms tightly across my chest. How did you find us? You used the joint credit card for the hotel. Of course I had. Another mistake. Ryan glanced past me instinctively, probably searching for signs of Ethan. When he didn't see him immediately, his shoulders relaxed slightly. That tiny reaction told me everything. You knew, I said quietly. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Can I come in? Number. A flicker of irritation crossed his face before disappearing beneath practiced calm. Claire, you left in the middle of the night with our daughter. Our daughter. The words landed differently now. You cheated on me with my best friend. It was a mistake. I stared at him in disbelief. A mistake is forgetting milk at the grocery store, Ryan. His jaw tightened. Fine, he snapped softly. I screwed up, but running away like this is insane. Insane. There it was. The same language he used in those emails about Ethan. Discredit, destabilize, control. I suddenly realized Ryan approached every relationship like a courtroom argument, not emotionally but strategically. Whoever controlled the narrative controlled the outcome. Unfortunately for him, I was finally learning how narratives work. You told Ethan I moved on, I said. Ryan's expression froze. For the first time since he arrived, genuine panic flashed across his face. He contacted you. You know he did. Silence. Then Ryan exhaled sharply and rubbed both hands over his face. Claire, listen to me carefully, he said in the patient tone people use with frightened children. When Ethan resurfaced, he was unstable. The VA doctors themselves admitted he had severe memory issues. So you decided for me. I protected you. The audacity of that sentence nearly made me laugh. You protected yourself. Ryan stepped closer instinctively. You were barely surviving when I met you. Do you remember that you couldn't sleep? You couldn't function. Half the time you walked around like a ghost. His voice softened dangerously. I put your life back together. No, I whispered. You stepped into a broken woman's life and made sure she stayed dependent on you. That hit him. I saw it immediately. Because narcissistic men can survive being called cruel. They can survive being hated. But they cannot survive being accurately seen. Ryan's composure cracked for one brief second before snapping back into place. You think Ethan's some kind of hero? He asked bitterly. You have no idea what those years were like. He was damaged. And what are you? The silence between us turned sharp. Then from inside the room, Lily's voice floated softly toward the doorway. Mommy! Ryan immediately shifted expressions, smoothing warmth back onto his face before she could appear. It was so automatic, so rehearsed, it made my stomach twist. Lily stepped cautiously into view, holding her stuffed rabbit. Ryan smiled. Hey, Bug. She hesitated. Just slightly. But enough for him to notice. Children feel truth before adults do. I missed you, he said gently. Lily looked down at the carpet. Ryan's eyes darkened for half a second. Then another voice spoke behind him. She doesn't owe you comfort right now. Ryan turned instantly. Ethan stood at the far end of the outdoor walkway carrying grocery bags, his expression calm but unreadable. Everything changed the moment the two men looked at each other. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like two versions of the same life finally standing face to face. Ryan laughed once under his breath. Unbelievable. Ethan walked closer, slowly setting the grocery bags near the door before looking directly at me. You okay? The question was simple. But Ryan noticed what mattered immediately. Ethan asked without controlling, without performing, without expecting anything in return. Ryan straightened. You should leave. Ethan ignored him completely and kept his attention on Lily instead. I brought blueberry waffles, he said softly, the frozen kind you like. Lily blinked in surprise. How did you know I like those? Ethan smiled faintly. Lucky guess. Ryan's face hardened. That was the moment he truly understood he was losing control. Not because Ethan returned. Because Lily already felt safe around him. People underestimate children constantly, but children know when affection is conditional. They know when love feels heavy instead of peaceful. Ryan stepped toward Ethan. "You need to stop inserting yourself into my family." Ethan finally looked at him directly. And God, the contrast between them became painfully obvious. Ryan looked polished, controlled, sharp around the edges. Ethan looked tired, scarred, deeply human. "You already inserted yourself into mine," Ethan said quietly. The words landed like a gunshot. Ryan's mask slipped completely then. "You think you can walk back into her life after 8 years, he hissed. "You think survival automatically makes you some tragic hero." "No," Ethan answered calmly. "But lying to a grieving woman for nearly a decade definitely makes you something." For a second I honestly thought Ryan might hit him. Instead, Ryan turned toward me with desperation finally overpowering charm. "Claire, please," he said. "You know me." I did. That was the problem. I knew. How he weaponized guilt, how he manipulated sympathy, how he studied vulnerable people and slowly positioned himself as indispensable. And suddenly I remembered something I had buried years ago. The night Ryan first kissed me, I cried afterward because I felt guilty moving on from Ethan. Ryan held my face gently and whispered, "You deserve to stop suffering." At the time it sounded compassionate. Now it sounded calculated. My chest ached with humiliation. How many moments in our marriage were real? How many were engineered? Ryan saw the answer forming on my face and panicked completely. "Savannah meant nothing," he blurted out. "Do you hear me? Nothing. I love you." I looked at him for a very long time. Then I said the sentence that finally ended our marriage. "No, Ryan, you loved being chosen by someone who was too broken to question you." He went completely still. And for the first time in years, I watched a manipulative man realize he no longer controlled the story. 3 weeks later, the custody hearing began. By then, my attorney had uncovered everything. The intercepted communications, the redirected emails, the financial deception involving Ethan's death settlement, evidence of Ryan's affair with Savannah during active marriage counseling. Ryan arrived wearing an expensive gray suit and the expression of a man still hoping performance could save him. But the truth had already escaped the cage. Near the end of the hearing, the judge asked whether Lily wished to speak privately with the court-appointed child specialist. Lily nodded nervously. The room softened immediately when she entered, small shoes, tiny cardigan, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. The specialist asked gently, "Do you feel safe with both parents?" Lily looked toward me first, then toward Ryan. Finally, she whispered, "Mom cries in the bathroom, so I won't hear her." The courtroom fell silent. Ryan's face drained of color. Then Lily looked toward Ethan, sitting quietly in the back row. "And in the innocent honesty only children possess," she said. "And he looks like me more than Daddy does." Nobody spoke after that. Because sometimes the truth arrives softly enough to destroy everything. The strange thing about revenge is that in real life it rarely feels triumphant in the moment. Movies teach people that justice arrives like fireworks, dramatic speeches, slammed doors, public humiliation, enemies collapsing beneath the weight of their own cruelty. But actual revenge, the kind that truly changes a life, is much quieter. It is sitting in silence one morning and realizing the person who manipulated you no longer controls your emotions. It is peace. And peace, after years of psychological exhaustion, feels almost holy. Winter arrived slowly in Asheville. The mountains turned silver beneath frost coffee shops, filled with tourists wearing scarves they didn't really need. And for the first time in nearly a decade, I began waking up without dread sitting on my chest. Not every morning. Healing is not linear. Some days I still woke confused, reaching toward the empty side of the bed before remembering Ryan was gone. Other mornings, grief returned unexpectedly, not grief for the marriage itself, but grief for the years I lost inside it. That was the hardest part to forgive. Time. You can recover money, rebuild trust, even survive betrayal. But time only moves in one direction. The custody ruling finalized 2 months after the hearing. The judge did not strip Ryan entirely from Lily's life. Family court in America rarely works that way unless danger is extreme, but the ruling heavily favored me after the evidence of manipulation, infidelity, and financial deception surfaced. Ryan received limited visitation rights pending mandatory counseling and further evaluation. When the decision was read aloud, Ryan looked smaller somehow. Not defeated. Just exposed. And exposure changes people. Especially men who spent their lives carefully constructing admiration. Savannah disappeared from our lives almost immediately after the hearing. Her social circle collapsed first. Then her influencer sponsorships quietly vanished one by one after screenshots of her affair spread through suburban parent groups faster than wildfire. For weeks, women who once adored her stopped commenting on her posts. Then stopped calling altogether. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But betrayal always shocks people most when it comes from someone welcomed into intimate spaces, someone trusted around children, marriages, holidays, grief. Savannah did not simply sleep with a married man. She sat at my table for years pretending to love me while envying my life. People eventually sensed that kind of emptiness. As for Ryan, the consequences unfolded slower, which somehow made them more satisfying. His real estate firm quietly pushed him out after several longtime clients requested reassignment. One couple publicly cited concerns about integrity, and in businesses built entirely on trust, reputation bleeds faster than money. He relocated to a smaller town outside Knoxville and started over at a lesser agency where nobody knew his history. Last I heard, he rented a modest apartment above a hardware store. Alone. And strangely enough, that felt fair. Not cruel, not excessive. Fair. Because despite everything Ryan did, I no longer wanted destruction for him. I wanted accountability. There is a difference. One icy Saturday morning in January, Ethan came over early carrying grocery bags, while Lily sat at the kitchen counter coloring birds into one of her sketchbooks. By then we had settled into something gentle, not romance exactly, not yet, but trust rebuilding itself piece by piece like bone healing after a fracture. Ethan never pushed. That mattered more than grand declarations ever could. Trauma teaches people to fear pressure disguised as love. Chocolate chips or blueberries, he asked Lily while unpacking pancake mix. Both, she answered immediately. He nodded solemnly, an ambitious choice. She giggled. The sound filled the apartment warmly, naturally, and for a moment I had to turn toward the sink because emotion rose too suddenly inside my throat. Ethan noticed anyway. He always noticed. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded once, yeah. But the truth was more complicated. Watching him with Lily hurt sometimes because joy and grief existed together now.